Joining us now for our roundtable discussion is Lourdes Ramirez. She's on the board of Sarasota's League of Women Voters. Kathy Atunis, host of The Detail on WSRQ Radio, and Rod Thompson, president of the Sarasota Republican Club. Thanks all for being here.
Thank you.
We trace this back to 2010, dark money, the U.S. Supreme Court. Lourdes, why don't you walk us through how this whole thing began just 6 years ago and has really snowballed since?
Well, with Citizens United, there was a group who wanted to show a film against Hillary Clinton, and they apparently were spending a lot of money and got into trouble. And they sued the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, saying that they wanted to be able to do this as a form of free speech. And that's how it started.
And they won that lawsuit.
And they won that
FEC
lawsuit.
lost, and I don't recall seeing that video. Was it out? 6 years ago now, Kathy.
I haven't seen the video either, but essentially what the decision did was elevate corporations to the same free speech status as people. So donations were cast as speech. They were considered free speech, money, and corporations had the same freedom as individuals to donate to campaigns.
And now here we are with the phrase of dark money. You would think in this age of transparency and everything else, all these disclaimers on commercials, that there wouldn't be any sort of concern or question rather, about where money comes from. But Rod, there seriously is a place called dark money now.
There's dark money and soft money, as Kate reported. I think with the Citizens United ruling, what you saw there was a clear issue where the Supreme Court ruled on it and decided that they were going to err in favor of free speech. And corporations, being people by people, were given free speech just like pornographers are given free speech. Not something I'm thrilled with, but you err on the side of free speech. That makes a certain amount of sense. But we continue to have the problem of the dark money now because we're always going to have a problem with money in the system. In politics, in Washington, in Tallahassee, we're always going to have a problem, in Sarasota, we're going to have a problem with money in the system. And I think that really the only good solution in the end is to be able to have a totally unfettered system, but a totally transparent system. So let people donate how much they want, let corporations donate, but everything must be totally transparent and public so that why politician getting all this money from this corporation or from these individuals, the public knows that going into it. So that's the role of the government, making sure everything's public, and that's the role of the media, making sure everybody knows what's public.
So the NRA could give $1 billion,
sure,
but the voters would know up front where the money's coming from.
That's exactly right.
You okay with that, Lourdes?
I agree with that completely. A lot of times when I was running too, and there was a PAC that was against me, and it was funded by a corporation, and we couldn't even find where that corporation was located, much less who funded that corporation. So it's really awful to have the opportunity now where people can hide behind a corporation while donating.
It's interesting, can I say, yes, how this is a bipartisan sort of frustration. I mean, because you had Joe Gruters on there, the same situation. I think you have Democrats with some of the same frustrations and all too, because it can be sort of shadowed like that and all. It just seems to me the solution is really not campaign finance reform like we try and do it at once every 10 years and make it generally worse or always human nature finds a way around it, but instead just open it up and everybody knows then.
Because nobody will say in public they are actually for dark money, will they? Except for those who are giving the money, perhaps.
Perhaps then. Right, but those are the people that you want to make it transparent then. So that those people, I mean, if it's some, Vegas casino owner or something that's given a lot of money, fine, he should have the right to do that, but let people know who he's given his money to, and they can vote accordingly.
And Kathy, you've written a lot about this on your blog, haven't you?
Sure. Yeah, I think what people in your audience may not realize is how much this is influencing our local elections. And typically what happens, there's different forms of dark money. One is the sham corporation that is registered in Wyoming or Delaware, and we've seen those locally, where you absolutely cannot trace the money to a particular person. So what these donors want, and our local PAC manager, Eric Robinson, has said, they want plausible deniability. They don't want the voter to know that they're influencing the election. On a local level, it's surprisingly cheap to buy a share of voice that gives you an election.
That phrase sounds chilling. Plausible deniability, right?
Right.
All right, we'll talk more about that after our brief break right now. Welcome back. Tonight we're talking about dark money on the Sun Coast. Our guests are Lourdes Ramirez, the board member with Sarasota's League of Women Voters, Kathy Atunis, host of The Detail on WSRQ Radio, and Rod Thompson, president of the Sarasota Republican Club. Now, Lourdes, you actually had a bit of a personal experience. You ran for county commission 2014, and take us through what happened to you involving dark money and how it was perhaps used against you.
This story, a lot of people believe this kind of stuff happens in Washington, D.C., and not in the local race. And when before I even considered running for county commission, I was talking about it, and I received a thank you letter that for a $200 donation I didn't make. And it turned out to be a local operative who donated the money in my name to try to make me look like I'm not who I am. And it's if it wasn't for the Sarasota Sheriff's Office, I wouldn't have known who he was, because it was all hidden really well. But the Sarasota Sheriff's Office looked into it, found out who it was, and he got arrested for doing that.
Certainly an unusual and unfortunate thing for you to have happened, but was that actually dark money by definition?
It would have been, because he was caught. You know, it wasn't. It was more open. But if he wasn't caught, by the time I would have found out about the donation, which would have been months later, we wouldn't have had the videotape of him making the purchase of the credit card. So it was exposed, but it would have been dark money.
After what you went through, would you run for office again?
Yes, I would. I would. I still think it's important for citizens to go and run for office, no matter how much they try to stop you.
If you just joined us, talking about dark money, political spending meant to influence a voter. Donor is not disclosed and the source of money is not known. And we were talking during the break with our guests, and I guess the one place you do differ is Rod said before the break that you'd be okay with no limits as long as we know where the money is coming from.
Right, that's the key thing, if I can say that, is to tie those two things together.
Right.
You have to, if you're going to have unlimited, you have to have total transparency for those donations.
And Kathy had said, let's have limits regardless.
Well, I view this as a form of legalized corruption. I think the dark money, there are many ways money can be hidden. But, you know, the Citizens United decision, I think, was ridiculous. Money is not speech. Corporations are not people. We have a lack of integrity in elections now, and we're seeing it on a local level with sham corporations. For instance, the 2014 school board race. Phoenix Media donating to a corporation $45,000, and you know, the PAC, Eric Robinson, who ran that PAC, when he was asked by the Herald Tribune, where is this company, he said, you'll never find it. You'll never find it.
I recall that vividly. Would you be okay with that level of contribution if you knew who it was coming from?
I don't think our system works best when we have a system that's set up for he who makes the gold makes the rules. I think limits have their place, and I think that a natural-born person is the appropriate donor. You know, I don't think we should have unfettered donations coming from corporations. It skews our policies and our politics in a very damaging way.
Rod?
I disagree on the Citizens United. I think that was probably properly ruled, because I think that is a free speech issue. I think corporations, we go through this with corporations and taxes and all too. It's their customers that pay taxes. In the same way, corporations are people. They're just people. The corporation is just an entity that surrounds the people. And so when you deny a corporation that may be greatly affected by policies that are set, and you deny them having any say in it whatsoever, then I think you're denying them their free speech. I think we mentioned it before, in the same way that pornography was ruled as free speech, because you want to have an abundance of caution on restricting Americans' free speech. I think the Citizens United ruling was proper also. That having been said, none of it would have been necessary if it weren't for the McCain-Feingold campaign finance reform, which was this grand attempt to try and get money out of politics, and it's a fool's errand. It's just not going to happen.
Lourdes, what are you doing locally? You're involved in a committee to try to change the rules?
The League of Women Voters has a committee to look at the campaign finance and see if there's anything we can do to improve it. One of them is to overturn Citizens United. We really don't think that that's really a good decision. It should be overturned, as well as other ideas like open primaries and even locally having single-member districts, those kinds of ideas to try to see if we can get some control over local elections.
How easy will that be? How easy will it be to change the rules locally, statewide, federally?
Well, I think certain things that we can do locally, like single-member districts, which, and right now, people run county-wide, but to have them run in their own district, someone like myself can spend a lot of time and focus on a district. But nationwide, that's a tougher thing to do.
I think, you know, if you're looking at ways that you can improve voter participation and transparency, which we all think would be a good thing, the good thing about our school board race is it's nonpartisan. And I think most people would agree that local offices really ought to be nonpartisan. I mean, filling potholes isn't a Republican or Democratic issue. When that label is missing from the candidate, I think when we see this with the school board, the voters take more initiative to research the candidate, and the best countervailing force to this kind of dark money is awareness, is the voter really knowing the candidates instead of relying on, you know, tons of mailers that come in a few weeks before a campaign and you don't even know who's sending them.
So I know we're on a sidebar here, but I think it's an important sidebar. I think that the nonpartisan races are actually a mistake. I think it's good to have the Republican or Democrat or Green Party or whatever label next to them, because that helps identify a worldview. I think worldviews also matter when it comes to local government. I think the idea of it being potholes, county government's way more than that. That's $1 billion budget that Sarasota County alone is working with. And they do everything from zonings to roads to, you know, fire. There's everything under the sun, you know, stormwater, et cetera, et cetera. That's a lot of stuff. There are a lot of issues that come up where, from my worldview of limited government being better for the people, I think the county sometimes goes the wrong direction, sometimes the right direction, city the same way. I think that when you have a partisan label that identifies that general worldview of the candidate, that helps the voter.
Well, it's been my experience that our county has actually acted in ways that I wouldn't expect of a fiscally conservative Republican. And so I think what we have locally is more cronyism than fiscal conservative behavior, number one. Number two, you know, I've been an independent most of my life, which means I've been paying taxes to fund primaries that I can't participate in. And that, to me, if you're for a participatory system, independents are the largest growing voter bloc in the United States, and the question's being asked, why are we paying taxes to fund primaries that basically serve the interests of parties and not voters?
Now, Lourdes, you want to say?
Well, I just want to say that's where open primaries can probably work, because you'll have the labels you want, but we won't disenfranchise those people
Right.
who couldn't vote in the particular primaries.
Problem with open primaries is then in a county like Sarasota County is then when you have a Republican primary, you end up with Democrats having a huge say in who the Republican nominee is. And so it's not the Republicans' fault that the Democrats don't come up with a nominee.
Well, but the Democrats live here too.
Right,
You know,
so
this
they
is
should
a
nominate
system-
somebody.
Yeah, well, but what about the independents? I'm paying for the Republican Party's primary or the Democrats' primary, and I don't have a say if I'm an independent. There's no justice in that. The system shouldn't be set up to advance the interests of a particular party. This should be about democracy. And just as dark money is thwarting democracy, these closed primaries are also detrimental.
Let's get back to dark money, shall we, in our final minute here? Dark money began, folks, about 6 years ago, a U.S. Supreme Court ruling that was in favor of some contributors and against the FEC, Election Commission, that is, and has since snowballed since then. California, it seems, is trying to lead the way and pulling back on this. No other state has taken the lead quite like California has. Is anybody in Florida looking to pull back on dark money, or is this mostly something only in California right now?
I think California is taking the lead, and we have to see what happens there before it goes to any other state.
Yeah, I would love to let California be the incubator on that, because my guess is it'll be a fabulous flop. But let's let them, you know, give it a try and see how that works with their campaign finance reform. I think it'll go the way of the rest of them.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I'm glad California often takes the lead, you know, in the United States, and we've seen that happen before. But when you're looking at some of these PACs, you know, there are a couple of PACs that are run locally that are actually into deficit spending, and that's something. There's ways we should control the rules about PACs.
Up next, some final thoughts from our guests and also viewer mail about last night's program. Stay with us. Some final thoughts now on dark money on the Sun Coast. Has been a steamrolling thing the past 6 years. Political spending meant to influence a voter. Donor is not disclosed. The source of money is not known. Lourdes, your final thoughts on this issue?
I think we need to start locally. It's kind of hard to work on a nationwide issue because it takes a lot of money, a lot of effort. But if we can start here, because this is what affects us in our backyard, and we really need to start working on fixing what's here. And I'd love to see more transparency. If it's possible to put it in a charter, I think that would be terrific.
Could you, in theory, change the rules locally?
The Citizens United talks about how much money you spend, but never stops you from being more transparent. So I really think you could. I'm not 100% sure I need a legal expert on that.
And
but
that is your goal right now.
Yeah.
Kathy?
I think it's a practical matter. Dark money has a huge influence on our local elections, and for the people watching, it's really important that when your mailbox is being stuffed in the final weeks of an election, and it has great names like Citizens Against Taxation or Citizens Have Rights in Sarasota, who could be against that? Those are you really have to look at those mailers with a very skeptical eye, and it could be that the person or the candidate who has the least amount of money to fill your mailbox is the one who's actually going to represent your interests the best.
Those names are very vague sometimes. They all sound great, don't they?
They all sound great.
Yes. Rod?
I think if we're going to do it, I've said it before, to take the caps off. I also think the caps being off are important from a Republican point of view, because Republicans, I feel like, always have to raise more money than Democrats because we have to get by the, no offense, media filter. And because we have to get by the media filter better than the Democrats do, we have to raise more money. Caps, in that case, hurt Republicans more than Democrats.
I would think with your access to social media and easy press conferences, you wouldn't need as much money.
If I had access to Beyonce's social media, yes.
Before we go, some comments on last night's topic. We talked about the second debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. On Sunday night, we asked what you thought, and here are some of your reactions. Cynthia Thrasher writes, Hillary conducted herself as the class act she is, answering the questions and knowledgeable on all topics. Nate Metz writes, considering the previous 48 hours or so, I think Trump did well. He talked tax, trade, economy, all in great comeback considering the circumstances. And Elisa Lipala writes, they both did their fair share of bullying and dancing around the important topics. If you want to join the conversation, go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/news at 7. Thanks to all our guests. A great topic tonight. Great conversation. Thank you all for being here.